guy sees a dangerous predator about to drown and makes a decision no one else would. When it comes to most animals and insects, you've probably heard the expression, "They're more afraid of you than you are of them," right? Still, that can be hard to believe. After all, how could an animal possibly be afraid of you if they have the power to bite or sting you and inflict some serious damage? That said, any animal no matter how big or dangerous deserves to be rescued whenever they venture into our space and find themselves in peril. When a bear ended up in a frightening situation, one man had to make a decision between trying to save the animal's life and risk losing his own. It's not often that wild animals will wander into our personal space. They typically want to avoid us at all costs, but on the rare occasion they do, they can get into trouble. Even the strongest predators on Earth can find themselves in a sticky spot once in a while. Bears, for example, aren't exactly the kind of animal you'd consider helpless. Still, bears are curious creatures, and when they get caught between a rock and a hard place, it's up to us to help them even at the risk of our own lives. That was no more evident than the case of one bear in Alligator Point on St. James Island in Florida. The 375-pound black bear had been sniffing around the neighborhood when he wandered into a home. Wildlife conservation officers were called to state him and safely relocate him to the wild, but moments after the bear was shot with a tranquilizer, things began to go very wrong. It may sound harsh to shoot an animal, even by strictly non-lethal means, but the wildlife officers had no choice. As much as the bear wanted nothing more than to mind his own business, he would have encountered a human soon enough. Even though using a tranquilizer was the humane option to ensure the bear and area residents stayed safe, there were no guarantees the process would go the way they planned it. Of course, that plan quickly backfired, because instead of sedating him, the dart immediately sent the bear into a panic. The wildlife officers readied themselves for the worst, but they didn't realize just how bad things were about to get. The large bear, who must have been terrified by the officers chasing him, made a beeline toward the nearby water and he began swimming out as far as he could. Unfortunately, that was when the sedatives started to kick in and he became drowsy. The sleepy bear clearly couldn't keep himself afloat and he began to drown. Adam Warwick, a biologist with the Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission, knew that he had to act quickly, or else the poor bear would surely die. Without hesitating, the fearless and determined Adam dove into the water and swam toward the huge bear. Most people couldn't imagine doing something quite so brave, but to Adam, it made perfect sense. At least in the moment. It was a spur-of-the-moment decision. "I had a lot of adrenaline pumping when I saw the bear in the water," Adam later said of the experience. Thank goodness for that adrenaline. If he'd thought too much about it, he would have realized how dangerous this situation was for him. What if the bear attacked him? Adam didn't have time to think twice. He grabbed the enormous bear with both hands and wrapped his arms around his neck. Then he started to kick toward shallow water where the other wildlife officers were waiting. The bear wasn't entirely asleep, and he was understandably distressed. He frantically tried to climb on top of Adam in an effort to stay afloat, but he was losing the ability to move his legs. That may have saved Adam's life, but it also made moving to safety more difficult. Despite his stressful and incredibly risky mission, Adam stayed as calm as he could as he approached more shallow water. He grabbed the bear by the scruff of his neck and carefully led him toward the boat so his fellow officers could assist with rope if they needed to. Thankfully, Adam was able to pull the powerful predator roughly 25 yards toward dry land. Moving the bear might have seemed relatively easy in the water, but it was a different story on the shore. The unusual pair finally made it safely to more shallow water after what must have seemed like an eternity. Though the bear was sedated, he could have lunged at Adam or swiped at him with his claws at any moment. Incredibly, Adam suffered only one scratch during the entire ordeal. Other than that, he was perfectly fine. Who would have known that he'd come out of this risky mission relatively unscathed? Once the unlikely pair reached the shore, Adam's colleagues stepped in to help the exhausted man and beast collect their bearings. It was going to take a lot of people and a lot of bravery along the way, too. The team drove a large tractor toward the water's edge to transport the groggy bear back to his home in Osceola National Forest. There was no way they would have been able to carry a 375-pound animal without a little help. Thankfully, the bear didn't suffer any injuries after his wild jaunt in the water. It was safe to say that he probably wouldn't go anywhere near water for a while following this experience. Most importantly, this massive bear was safe and back in a habitat that suited him best. Hopefully by now he's learned to avoid wandering into residential neighborhoods. Heroes are those who do the right thing without fear, despite what the consequences might be. Adam certainly meets this criteria, stepping up to do the unthinkable when no one else dared, and saving the life of one of the most dangerous animals in the world in the process. If you like it, share it away with your friends.